Hey, Travis with TCustomz Productionz, TCustomz.com. Today we're deep diving, doing a beat breakdown on the most recent instrumental that I put up. A number of you were asking for some more in-depth, step-by-step videos, and I wanted to open this up rather than just doing a beat-making video, actually step you through some of the elements. Definitely envision like a crossover track for this, like an R&B hip-hop crossover. I could definitely hear a dope R&B singer on the chorus, maybe even a full R&B song. It definitely has those hip-hop elements and vibes. I entitled it Ridin music. That was just kind of the vibe and feeling I was getting when I was making the track. You can let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, the style or the vibe that this track has. Just to give you a quick history on the way this track kind of evolved, about 3 or 4 months ago is when this track started, and I was using my laptop at the time. Many of you, if you call any of my past beat making videos, tutorials, you may have seen me using the laptop, and I'm still using it a little bit, but I pretty much transitioned most of my work over to my desktop computer now. And so recently I was going back through a number of my older sessions on my laptop and trying to figure out which tracks do I scrap, which tracks do I think have a good start and that I just need to complete. And this is one of the tracks that I ended up taking off the laptop. The final version of this instrumental actually contains around 30 tracks. On my laptop, I think I had about 20 of those running, or maybe a little bit less. And with all the plugins and virtual instruments I had loaded in memory and all the resources that that session was occupying, as I started to try to develop the track more, I was about 80% done, I would say. It just kept crashing. Anytime I loaded a new plugin, I was just exceeding my memory limit, the CPU was spiking, all these kind of things. And so what I decided to do was just render all the tracks down into audio files and import the audio into a new session on my desktop and start adding new elements from here. And so that's what I've got. I'm not really able to recreate a lot of these tracks. I'm just going to be playing back, just kind of explaining the process for this track. Started out with a main synth melody. The very first track that I have, first audio track, is actually 3 different layers that I rendered from my old session. So I'm not able to play you those all independently. But for those of you who are having problems kind of filling out your tracks, you feel like the melodies are good, but they're not really as big sounding, or the depth really isn't there, I would just really remind you and encourage you to layer your sounds. And I know many of you probably do this, but based off of some of the recent submissions that I had received from the music showcase, some of the sounds were just either bad selection or they were just kind of thin. And a lot of times you just get an experiment, and that's kind of what I did with this. I started out with one main synth, and then I just duplicated many tracks with the exact same MIDI line, and then just experiment with different effects on each of the tracks. It's not like a set rules or way to do it. It takes a little bit of time sometimes to dig through sounds, but it can make the world of difference in making your track sound a lot bigger using one melody line that you've created and then just stacking sounds, panning, EQing, and automation. And so like I said, this first synth track is actually 3 synths layered, but I'll go ahead and play you what this sounds like. So next I have about 3 additional synth sounds that I layered even on top of those first 3. The first one is more of like a mid-frequency synth. On top of that, I layered another higher frequency synth. I'm calling it a noise synth just because it's a lot of that higher register coming through. Very subtle and kind of pushed back in the mix, but again, it gives it additional depth. The next layer is a low register synth, and the only difference with this synth is at the end of the 8 bar, the tail at the end of the 8 bars, it actually extends out. It has some cool automation, and it really brings the loop back together. So after those main synth lines, I went ahead and got the kick and snare in the mix. Now the kick is just actually one kick. I'm not sure which pack this came from. The snare, I think the main snare has 3 snares layered. One is just a subtle reverb snare. Added a very subtle clap track that comes in the second snare of every 2 bars. On top of that, I also added an additional reverb snare that's very subtle, just kind of pushed back in the mix. Also tambourine. So those elements sound like this together. So next I have a couple of hi-hat tracks. Both of them are actually filtered breaks or loops that I had in various packs. Filtered and panned them. One is slightly left, one is slightly right to kind of widen the percussive track, and they both have different elements in them just slightly. The way those sound together. So the next instrument layer that I added was a string sound. I rolled off a lot of the mid and low frequencies. There's a lot of the high frequencies coming through on the strings. Next, I added kind of a sub bass. I'm using a patch from the TCustomz bass sample pack. And so this sub bass is going to kind of fill up that lower register, fill in the gap of what that low synth that I played you earlier is not occupying. Before I get into the lead synth, I want to play you some of these little, what I'm calling sound effects. This first one is kind of like a transitional synth, I guess. And so that transitional effect comes in at about 4 bar marks, so it transitions that 4th to 5th bar. And so at the end of 8 bars, wrapping back around, I brought in this little string sample that I found in one of my various sample pack folders. And then one more synth sound before we get into the lead. And a lot of this was just experimentation. I was just playing around some different stuff on the keys. I liked how that sounded, and this is what it sounds like.